Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another segment of J Culture. How have you guys been doing? I trust you guys have been doing great. I just really want to appreciate everyone for your love and your support. Thank you so much for everything. All right, let's go right to the class. In today's class, we're going to be learning another method of drafting the pants that you can also call the trouser. Okay, please remember not to mix them up to say pant trouser. It's called either pant or trouser. Okay, so the measurements we're going to be using, the hip circumference is 42, the waist circumference is 30, the thigh circumference is 26, the knee circumference is 18, the ankle circumference is 15, and the full length of the pant is 38. So in this method, we're going to be splitting the sewing seam allowance. For the previous video, we did the part that all the sewing seam allowance has to go to the back. But for this video, we're going to be splitting the sewing seam allowance to both the front and the back. Okay, so the front will be having the sewing seam allowance and the back is also going to be having the sewing seam allowance, meaning we're going to be using 2 inches for sewing seam allowance. So front pattern will be having 1 inch and the back pattern will be having 1 inch. So let's dive right in. Firstly, we're going to draw the guidelines. So here is going to serve as a waistline. So I'll do same at the side, but it's not going to serve as anything. It's just a directive. Having done that, we're going to place the full length of the pant. The full length of the pant is 38. So we're going to mark 38. I'll be using 1.5 inches for folding allowance. So you can decide to use 1 inch or 1.5 or 2 inches or even more, depend on what you want to achieve. Okay. So yeah, I'll be using 1.5 inches. Then I'll give it a straight rule. Having done that, we're gonna place the crush depth. Here we did not take the measurement of the crush depth. We can use the hip measurement. In our previous video, I taught us how we could use the hip measurement. Okay, so we're going to be learning it again in this video. So the hip circumference is 42. We divide 42 by 4. It's going to give us 10.5 inches. So that can also be our crush depth. We're just going to add half an inch for ease. Okay, so place our measurement tape on the waistline and mark 11 inches. So I'm going to give it a straight rule. So here is our crush depth. Having done that, we're going to take the measurement of the hip depth. Okay, so from here we're going to take the measurement of the hip depth. We'll be using 8 inches. You can decide to use 8 or 8.5 inches or 9 inches, depending on the size of your client. So we'll be using 8 inches here. So I'm going to mark 8 inches here. And give it a rule. So I'm going to label hip depth. Having done that, remember we're going to be adding the waistband. Okay, so for your trouser, if you don't want to add the waistband, so there's no need for what I'm about to do. But for this trouser, we're going to be adding a waistband. So I'll be adding 1 inch for waistband. It depends on the size of the waistband that you want to add to your pants. So you make sure to remove it from the measurement of the pants. Okay, whatever measurements you'll be using for your waistband, make sure to remove it from the measurement of your pants. Here I'm gonna be adding 1 inch from 1 inch waistband for the pants. Okay, so I'll be removing 1 inch away from this measurement. Okay, so here we have 11 inches, so I'm going to minus 1 inch. I haven't done that. This place becomes a new waist line. So this becomes a new waistline, okay? So here we don't need it for the pants, okay? This part is the band. We don't need it for the pants. So please do not forget to minus 1 inch away from the measurement of your pants if you know you'll be adding a waistband. But if you know you're not going to be adding a waistband, there is no need to remove anything from the measurement of the pants. Having done that, we're going to take the hip circumference. So the hip circumference here is 42. Remember, we're going to be adding sewing seam allowance for both the front and the back pattern. We'll be using 2 inches for the sewing seam allowance. So we're going to split it into two. So we'll be using 1 inch for front pattern and the other 1 inch for the back pattern. So here we have 42 as our hip circumference. We divide 42 by 4 will give us 10.5 inches, plus the 1 inch sewing seam allowance will give us 11.5 inches. So from this line, we're going to take 11.5 inches measurement. Here becomes the hip circumference. We'll take it up to the waist. Then we'll give it a straight rule. So here becomes the cross length line. Cross length line, okay? Having done that, we're just going to extend this cross depth line so that we can take measurement of the cross extension. So let's extend the hip depth line also. So now to get the cross extension, line, that curve area, to get that curve area, so we're going to come to this very angle. We'll take it up by 1 inch or 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches. It depends on the size, of the client. Okay, please do not forget it depends on the size of the client. So I'm going to be using 1.25 inches above. Okay, so from this angle I'll take it up by 1.25 inches. Then on this cross length line, I'll take it forward by 2/1/8. The reason is because we divided the tie by 12. Okay, we're using this is the second method of how to draft the pants. Okay, so please do not mix it up with the first method. So this is another method entirely. So to get the extension of the crush, we'll divide the tie by 12. Whatever you have for your client's circumference of the tie, you divide it by 12. Here the tie measurement is 26, so divide 26 by 12 will give us 2.1 and multiple 6. Okay, so I'm just going to be using 2.1, that's 2/1/8 inches. So I'll place 2/1/8 inches here, then I'll add half an inch for ease. So this is what we'll be having. Okay, so I'm going to make the midpoint. To get the midpoint, I'm going to take the midpoint down to the full length of the pants. Okay, so I'm going to measure the midpoint. Please do not add the half an inch for ease. Okay, just the measurement of the extension. That's what we'll be using. So from the measurement of the extension to the full length, that's the tie measurements now. Okay, remember it's the tie measurements now. So from here we're going to measure. Here we have 13 3/4. We're going to divide 13 3/4 by 2 to get the midpoint, okay? Divide 13 3/4 here. So we measure to know what we have. We have 6/1/8. That's 6 inches, 7/8. Okay, we have 6 inches, 7/8. So we're going to take it down to the full length of the pant. Okay. So this is what we'll be having. Now we're going to take measurement of the knee length. Here we do not have the knee length measurement. So how we're going to do it? Here we're going to place the measurement tape on the crush depth line, okay? The measurement tape on the crush depth line. So whatever we have that is remaining from this line to this full length line, we have 27 inches. So we're going to get the midpoint of 27. We'll divide it by 2. 2 divided by 27, we have 13.5 inches. We'll just make a point here, mark it here. So from this very point, we take it up by 2 inches or 2.5 inches or 3 inches. Mind you, it depends on the height of your client, okay? So we're going to be using 2.5 inches here. So here becomes the knee length line. So I'm just going to make sure it's accurate. From the crush depth line, we have 11 inches. So I'm going to mark 11 inches. I'll just extend it so that I can get a very straight line. So here becomes our knee length line. And here is a full length of the pant. Having done that, we're going to take the curve area. Oh yeah, we've not actually curved this part of the pant. That we've not marked this place. So having done that, we're just going to connect it. So this is what we'll be having. Okay, so you see, this is what we'll be having. Then we'll come to the waist to take the measurement of the waist. Here we have 30 divided by 4 will give us 7.5 inches, plus the 1 inch for sewing seam allowance, which is 8.5 inches. So we're going to come to this line, that's the cross length line. That's where we're going to be starting our measurement from. We'll place our tape there. Then we'll mark 8.5 inches. Mark 8.5 inches. So this becomes the waist measurement. They'll connect it down to the hip line. Okay, connect it down to the hip line with your hip curve ruler. So this is what we'll be having. Then we'll come to the knee line. We have our knee measurement as 18 inches. 18 divided by 2 will give us 9 inches, plus 1 inch for the sewing seam allowance will give us 10 inches. So we're going to place 10 inches here. So from this very midpoint line, we're going to divide that 10 inches by 2, okay? So mark 5 inches here and 5 inches here, which is going to be 10 inches. Then we'll come to the full length of the trouser, which serves as our ankle area. So the ankle area is 15. 15 divided by 2 will give us 7.5 inches, plus 1 inch for sewing seam allowance will give us 8.5 inches. So we'll divide 8.5 inches by 2 so that we can have an accurate measurement from the midpoint line. So we'll have 4 1/4 here and 4 1/4 here. So this serves as our ankle circumference. Now we'll use our straight ruler to connect it from the ankle line to the knee line. We'll do same here. Having done that, we're going to use our hip cover to also connect it from the knee length to the hip line. That's the knee length line to the hip line. So make sure you're going to use this other side of the hip cover to connect it like so at the inseam area, okay? So this is what we'll be having so far for the front pants. I hope we understand. Remember, we've already added our sewing seam allowance, which is 1 inch to the front, okay? So we are not transferring all the sewing seam allowance to the back. We splitted it already, okay? So we're adding 1 inch here, then 1 inch to the back. So now we're going to come to the waist area. We're going to take it down by 1 inch, depend on the stomach of your client. If your client has a flat stomach, you can use half an inch from the waistline. You take half an inch away from the waistline, that's below the waistline, or 1 inch below the waistline. It all depends on the protruding of the client's stomach, okay? So I'm going to be using 1 inch away from the waistline, then I'll connect it back to the waist. I hope we are following. So this is what we'll be having for the front pattern so far. And before I forget, if you would like to add either a pleat or a dart in front, all you need to do is to add 1 inch for your dart intake, okay? For the front pattern, I'm not going to be adding a dart. I'm only going to be adding that at the back pants, okay? So for the front pants, I'm not going to be adding that. But if you'd like to, all you need to do is to add 1 inch here. Then when you want to sew it, you divide it by 2 to get the midpoint, okay? To get the midpoint after adding your 1 inch dart allowance. So you divide it by 2 to get the midpoint. So you add, so you just mark half an inch here and half an inch here. Then you take it down by 3 inches. 3 inches. Then you make a triangle line. That's for your dart intake. So this becomes your dart. Why this becomes your dart and why this becomes the complete measurement of the pants. So this is your dart. We are done with the front pattern of the pants, okay? So to cut out your folding allowance, all we need to do is just to fold it behind. We just fold it behind, okay? So that you know the amount of folding allowance you can cut out. So there will not be any inconveniences while you are sewing it, okay? So this is how you do it when you are cutting it from either your pattern paper or from your fabric, okay? So this is what we'll be doing. So for this one, you don't need to add any sewing seam allowance on your fabric again for the front pattern. You've already added it to your paper, okay? Please do not forget that. So now we're going to cut out.